Hello, and welcome to Fear Noir. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly draw you deeper into the darkness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, let your body relax into stillness, and allow the outside world to slowly fade into silence. Tonight, the darkness has a story waiting for you. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself drift into Fear Noir. Story 1. It isn't really like me to talk about myself this openly. I usually keep things locked up, like if I don't say them out loud, they can't follow me into the daylight. But my family has been pushing me to stop shutting everyone out, and I guess this is what that looks like. They say I've been distant for years. They say I go quiet in the middle of conversations, like I'm listening to something that isn't there. They say my eyes don't look right sometimes, like I'm somewhere else. I don't know how to explain any of it without going back to the last time I saw my aunt. People keep calling it a phase, or a break, or an episode, and doctors have their words for it too. But none of that fits the way it felt. Whatever medicine I've tried, whatever labels they've given me, those memories don't fade. If anything, they sit sharper in my mind with time, like they've been waiting. It was 1995 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, back when summers didn't feel like a break from life, but like stepping into another life entirely. The air there was thick and warm, heavy with the smell of food, exhaust, rain-soaked dirt, and flowers I couldn't name. Everything looked more alive than anything I knew in the States. Bright houses packed close together, paint peeling in places, but still bold. Motorbikes weaving through tight streets, people calling to each other like they had all the time in the world, laughing in a way that sounded like it came from deep in the chest. Even the silence was different, because it was never really silent. There were always voices, always movement, always something buzzing. My mom took me every summer to visit family. It was just what we did. In the States, she worked hard, kept things structured, kept the house and our lives in order. In Haiti, the structure loosened, the days stretched, the heat slowed everything down. Sometimes the electricity would cut out during the day, and nobody acted like it was a crisis. You just adjusted. If the fan stopped, you found shade. If the lights were off, you opened windows. Life kept going. Most afternoons I would sit around watching my grandma, my mom, and a couple of my aunties moving through the kitchen like it was their stage. They cooked with confidence, like they didn't measure anything but still knew exactly what it needed. They would stir pots and taste sauces and argue gently about who remembered the recipe right. Eerie John would be going in one pot, dark and rich, and legume in another, thick with vegetables and spices. And while they cooked, they gossiped. That was the real ritual, talking, laughing, sighing, clicking their tongues in that way that carried a whole opinion without needing a full sentence. Most of it didn't reach me. They spoke in Creole, fast and musical, and I only caught pieces. A word here and there, a name, a tone that told me whether something was funny or serious. I felt like I was listening to a radio station that kept fading in and out. But I watched them closely anyway, because even when you don't understand the words, you can understand the weight of the moment. I noticed the way they leaned in when something was important. I noticed how quickly their eyes would move to the door if someone they didn't trust walked by, and I noticed, Always. The crosses. With every laugh, every cough, every sharp breath through the teeth, those gold crosses swung from their necks. They caught the light when the sun came through the windows. They flashed when someone turned their head too fast. It was like a heartbeat you could see. I knew I was Catholic because that was what my family said we were. We went to church. We prayed before meals. We had saints on the walls. I wore a cross like it was as normal as shoes. But as a kid, I didn't really know what it meant beyond habit. It wasn't something I questioned. It was just the air I lived in. My aunt, though, didn't fit neatly into that picture. She was always the one the others talked about when they thought I wasn't listening. Not in a loving way. More like she was a problem they had learned to live around. The black sheep. The one with ideas. The one with ways. Even as a child, I could feel the tension when her name came up. The room would shift a little. Someone would make the sign of the cross quickly, almost without thinking. My mom would get tight in the jaw. People called it magic, but they didn't say the word like it was fun. It came out like a warning. I didn't know what voodoo meant back then. I had heard the word in American movies, the kind that showed dolls with pins and people casting curses in dark rooms. It seemed fake, like a scary story. But in Haiti, it wasn't a joke word. It had weight. It had history. It had real fear attached to it, especially in a house where everyone wore gold crosses and believed in the power of holy water. My aunt didn't seem afraid of any of it. She moved through the world like she already knew something everyone else was trying not to admit. She wasn't loud or dramatic, not the way people imagine when they hear psychic. She was calm, watchful. Her eyes rested on you like hands, like she could feel things under your skin without touching you. The first time she pulled me aside, it felt like being chosen for something. We were away from the kitchen noise, away from the women's voices, in a quieter part of the house where the air didn't move as much. The light was softer. She took my hands in hers and turned them over, palm up, like she was reading a book. She told me about her hands, about what she could do. She said she could see people's lives in their palms. Not just lines like the cheesy palm reading you see at fairs, but something deeper. She described it like waves, like your body carried signals, and she could catch them. Like she could feel what had already happened to you, and what was still coming. I remember wanting to believe her, not because I was desperate or gullible, but because she spoke like she was telling the truth. And because part of me already felt like there were things in the world that didn't fit into neat explanations. Even as a kid, I had moments where I'd get a strange feeling about a person before they spoke, or I'd know what my mom was about to say before she said it. I didn't call it anything. I just noticed it. My parents hated when my aunt talked to me about those things. I could tell. My mom would pull me away if she saw us together too long. My dad would get quiet, his face hard. They didn't want me to learn those ideas. They didn't even want me to be curious. They treated it like a door you shouldn't open because you might not be able to close it again. But my aunt didn't care. She would lean down a little, close enough that I could smell whatever oil or soap she used, and she'd say, softly but firmly, "We are special." Then she'd tap my hand as if to prove I was real, and she'd add, "It's in our blood." We still went to Sunday service. That part never changed. In our family, church wasn't optional. You dressed right, you sat still, you listened, you prayed. The priest's voice would echo, The candles would flicker. I'd feel the heat and the bodies packed close. I would do everything I was supposed to do, but my mind always drifted back to my aunt's words. "How would I know if I have it?" I asked her once, after church, when my mom was distracted talking to someone outside. My aunt smiled like the question didn't surprise her, like she had been waiting for me to ask. "You're gonna know," she said. That answer should have annoyed me. It was the kind of answer adults give when they don't want to explain. But something about the way she said it made my stomach drop a little, like she wasn't avoiding the question, like she truly meant there would be a moment when I wouldn't need to ask anymore. When I try to tell this story, I keep saying "that night," and I always feel stupid when I do, because it makes it sound like I remember everything clearly. I don't. Some parts are sharp, some parts are missing, like someone tore pages out. If you asked me to tell you exactly where I was, what time it was, what room I was in, I wouldn't know how to answer. The memory doesn't sit in my head like a normal memory. It feels like waking up from a dream you can't fully describe, but the fear is still in your body. It started with being tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Not just sleepy, but heavy, like my bones had extra weight, like my eyes didn't belong to me. I would get drowsy in the middle of the day, even after a full night of rest. People thought I was being lazy. They thought I was bored. But it wasn't that. It was like something was pressing down on me from the inside. Then came the nights. Sometimes I would wake up in my bed and not be able to move. My eyes would be open, my mind would be awake enough to understand I was in my room, but my body wouldn't listen. I couldn't turn my head away. I couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't even call out. All I could do was breathe, and sometimes even that felt thin and difficult. And in those moments, I would see things. Not like normal shadows, not like a trick of the light that you can blink away. I would see shapes that didn't make sense, movement where nothing should move. The corner of the room would feel crowded, like something was standing there but refusing to fully show itself. Sometimes it felt like something was leaning over me, close enough that I could feel a change in the air, a pressure like a person's body near yours. Those were the worst nights, because I couldn't look away even when every part of me wanted to. Later on, I got diagnosed with narcolepsy. Doctors gave it a clean explanation. Sleep attacks, sudden drowsiness, strange dream states bleeding into waking life, sleep paralysis. They gave me terms that made it sound manageable, like it was just a problem with wiring. They gave me medicine, too. They told me it would help. But even when I accepted the diagnosis, there was a part of me that didn't fully believe it was that simple. Not because I don't trust science, but because what happened didn't feel random. It didn't feel like a broken switch in my brain. It felt aimed. It felt like something was trying to reach me specifically. I tried to tell myself I was just tired. I told myself I was stressed. I told myself I needed to fix my sleep. I told myself I was staying up too late, and that explained why I couldn't always tell what was real. I told myself a lot of things, because it was easier than admitting I was scared. And my aunt, of all people, never judged me. She didn't look at me like I was fragile or crazy. She looked at me like I was in the middle of something she understood. Sometimes I would spend the night at her place, because being there made me feel watched over in a different way. Not protected exactly, but seen. My mom always made sure I wore my cross. She'd check it like it was a seatbelt. Her fingers would touch the chain at my neck, and she'd say something like, "Keep it on." She didn't say why. She didn't need to. In her mind, the cross wasn't just jewelry. It was coverage, insurance, a barrier. My aunt's house felt different from my grandma's. The air seemed quieter, even when people were talking. The shadows looked deeper. There were small things around that my mom wouldn't have liked. Little bundles, candles, things that looked like they had stories. Nothing jumped out as evil or dramatic. It was more like the house had its own rules. One evening, I sat with my aunt and felt that heavy tiredness settle into me again. I was young, but I knew the feeling by then. It would creep in like fog. My eyelids would pull down. My thoughts would slow. It didn't matter if I had slept. It didn't matter if I had eaten. When it came, it came. My aunt watched me the way she always did, with that look that made me feel like she was seeing something behind me or through me. But it wasn't the kind of look that makes you feel judged. It was more like patience, like she was waiting for a moment to arrive. "You're tired," she said. I shook my head too fast. "No, I'm not." I still don't know why I lied. There was no point. Maybe I was trying to prove I was normal. Maybe I didn't want the tiredness to be real if I didn't admit it. Maybe I didn't want to give it power. My aunt didn't argue with me. She just hummed, low in her throat, like she was agreeing with someone I couldn't hear. That hum made the hair on my arms rise. It wasn't threatening. It was just wrong in a way I can't fully describe. Like a conversation happening beside me. Then she said, in a voice that sounded almost gentle, "Your dreams are waking up before you do." I didn't understand what she meant. Not really. My first thought was that she was talking about my sleep problems, about the way I'd get stuck between dreaming and waking. But the way she said it made it sound like something else. Like my dreams weren't just images, like they were alive, moving ahead of me, stepping into the world before I did. That was when I saw it. I hesitate, even now, to call it anything, because every word feels wrong. If I say shadow, it sounds too normal, like it was just a dark patch in a room. If I say figure, it sounds too human. All I know is that something moved behind her, passing her shoulder in a way that didn't match the light or the space. It was like the air thickened into a shape and then slid forward. My heartbeat became so loud, it felt like it filled my ears and pushed everything else away. My mouth went dry. I couldn't blink. For a second, the room seemed stretched, like time slowed down just enough for me to realize what I was looking at. The shape leaned in, and in that moment, I had the strongest, coldest feeling of recognition. Not that I recognized it from a picture, not that I had seen it before in a normal way, but that it recognized me. Like it knew my name, like it knew where I came from, like it knew what parts of me were open, what parts were hidden, and which parts were easy to slip into. That was the worst part. Not the fear, not even the sight of it, but the certainty that something had already happened through me, not by me. I don't remember doing anything. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember moving at all. The memory breaks there, like a skipped piece of film. But I remember the feeling afterward, when my mind snapped back into place, and I became aware of my body again. There was a warm trickle running down my wrists. At first, my brain tried to make it into something else, because that's what your brain does when reality is too much. Sweat, maybe. Water. Something spilled. But when I looked, it was dark and sticky and wrong. My stomach turned. My skin went cold in a wave. I don't know what I had done. I don't know what had been done to me. I don't even know if the blood was mine, and that question has haunted me more than any answer could. I only know that I felt like I had been used, like something had borrowed my body the way you borrow a tool, without permission and without care. I looked at my aunt, expecting panic, expecting her to rush to me, to call someone, to scream. Instead, she looked almost sad, not surprised, not confused, just sad, like she had hoped it wouldn't happen that way. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight. My mind kept flipping back to her words. We are special. It's in our blood. I hadn't even felt tired until she said it. That detail sticks with me because it makes me wonder if she saw it coming the moment I walked into her house. Or, worse, if saying it out loud opened something, like naming the thing gave it a doorway. After that night, everything got labeled and managed by other people. My family scrambled in the way families do when something happens that threatens their idea of normal. They didn't talk about my aunt's ways anymore, not directly. They didn't want her name in the air. They acted like if they didn't say it, it couldn't be true. They paid for a therapist. They brought up terms I had never heard before, trying to make it medical, trying to make it safe. Someone mentioned religious psychosis, like I had gotten too deep into belief and started seeing things that weren't there. They talked about stress and trauma and imagination. They talked about my sleep disorder like it was the root of everything. Maybe parts of that are true. I'm not saying I'm above diagnosis. I'm not saying my brain is perfect. I know what narcolepsy is. I know what sleep paralysis is. I know the mind can play brutal tricks on you when you're exhausted. But my family still asks me, years later, if I really believe my aunt was a psychic. They ask carefully, like they're afraid the answer will start something again, like the wrong word might bring the wrong presence back into the room. And I always tell them the truth. I still believe it, not because I want to, not because it makes a good story. I believe it because of the way she looked at me, like she already knew what was hiding behind my eyes. I believe it because of that hum, like she was speaking to something that didn't need a mouth. I believe it because of what she said about my dreams waking up before I do, and because in that moment, I understood exactly what she meant, even though I couldn't explain it. Most of all, I believe it because something leaned in close to me that night, something that felt like it had been waiting, and it looked at me like I belonged to it. And no amount of medicine has ever changed the fact that I can still feel it sometimes, when the room is quiet and my body is tired, like the line between sleep and waking is thin, like my dreams are standing up early, stretching, getting ready to walk around, like I'm the last one to arrive in my own life. Story 2. There's a building at the far edge of my university campus that almost nobody will admit is real. I spent months trying to understand why. I'm still not sure I have a clean answer, and I'm not sure I ever will. I go to our university, a mid-sized state school in New Jersey. I'm still a student there. If you attend the same place and you already know what I'm talking about, you'll understand why I'm not writing my name or the school's full name. Even saying the wrong thing in the wrong place can get you unwanted attention. And I've learned that people get strangely tense when this subject comes up. Before I get into it, I need to be honest about something. I don't have hard proof for most of what I'm going to share. What I do have is a real building that you can physically stand in front of, a silence around it that feels intentional, and a pile of secondhand stories from people who don't know each other and don't have any reason to coordinate. You can believe me or not. All I can do is tell you what I saw, what I found, and what people quietly told me when they thought I'd drop the subject. This is about the Triad Apartments, and if you've been a student at my university for years and you've never heard that name, that's exactly the point. I've been at our university for almost 3 years. I did the campus tour like everyone else. I sat through orientation and the mandatory housing sessions. I lived in dorms, dealt with resident assistants, and spent more time talking to housing staff than most students ever do. In all that time, not once did I hear anyone mention Triad Apartments. Not in a meeting, not in an email, not in the housing portal, not on the official campus map PDF they hand out to freshmen, not in Savitz Hall, where the housing office is. Nowhere. It wasn't just that I didn't personally run into the name. It was like the name didn't exist in the university's vocabulary at all. And for a place that used to house students, that should be impossible. You can't erase an entire residential complex from the normal chatter of campus life, unless someone tries. I only heard about it because of a small accident. During junior year, someone on my floor mentioned it in passing. They said it quickly and quietly, like they weren't sure they were allowed to say it out loud. Then they immediately changed the subject. The whole moment lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it stuck in my head because of how strange their tone was. Later, I asked them about it. I figured maybe it was an older dorm or an apartment complex students used to talk about, like any campus rumor. They got stiff, looked uncomfortable, and said something like, "It's just a thing people say. I don't actually know anything." Then they acted like they had somewhere else to be. That was enough to hook me. Curiosity is a bad habit. It makes you push on doors that are locked for a reason. The first thing I did was look it up, because that's what any normal person does. I checked Apple Maps, I checked Google Maps, I checked the official interactive campus map on the university website. I even pulled up the PDF map they give incoming students, the one that lists every building, every parking lot, every dining hall, even the tiny facilities most people never notice. The name wasn't there. At first I thought maybe Triad was an unofficial nickname, like students calling a building something different than the school does. But then I noticed something weirder. Even the building itself wasn't labeled. Not Triad, not any other name. Nothing. And this wasn't some tiny shed or maintenance building. This was a real set of apartment-style buildings, big enough that people must have lived there for years. Every other residential building was clearly marked. Every dining hall was marked. The academic buildings were marked. Even the surface parking lots were marked, including ones so small they feel pointless. But this one place was absent, like someone had carefully gone through and made sure it wouldn't show up. So I started asking questions. Not loudly, not on social media, not in a way that could get screenshotted and passed around. I asked carefully and only to people I trusted, one by one, and I paid attention to their faces more than their words. I asked an RA I'd known since freshman year. He's the kind of person who usually has answers, or at least knows who to ask. I said, as casually as I could, "Have you ever heard of Triad Apartments?" He paused. It was just a beat, but it was too long. It was the pause of someone quickly deciding how to answer. Then he said no. When I pushed a little and asked if he was sure, His expression shifted. He admitted he thought he'd heard the name once, maybe, but he didn't know where it was and didn't know what it was used for. Then he suggested I ask the housing office in Savitz Hall. That alone felt off. RAs know the housing landscape. It's part of their job. Even if a building was out of use, most of them would at least know the name, the way people know old dorm names or renovated buildings. But he suddenly acted like he'd never heard of it, then switched to a vague, maybe once, like he was trying to land on the safest possible answer. I went to Savitz. The first staff member I spoke to looked at me like I'd asked about a building on another campus. She said she wasn't familiar with that name and asked if I was sure I was talking about our university. I said yes. I described where I'd been told it was located, roughly, without sounding like I'd already been there. She told me she'd look into it and get back to me. She never did. A week later, I tried again, but with a different angle. I spoke to another staff member and said I was researching the history of campus housing for a class project. I kept my tone light, like it was normal curiosity, nothing serious. This person didn't deny it. In the same way, instead she gave me a sentence that sounded practiced, like she'd said it before. She said there were older residential facilities that were no longer in use and pending evaluation, and if I wanted documentation, I'd need to submit a records request. The words were polite and tidy. The message underneath them felt like, "Stop asking." Of course, I submitted the records request. That was what I told myself I wanted anyway. Something official, something that would make this feel like a normal administrative thing, instead of whatever it was turning into. Weeks later, I got a response. It was short. It said the building had been decommissioned from residential use because of recurring infrastructure concerns, including drainage issues and confirmed presence of environmental hazards. That was it. No timeline, no details, no mention of when it happened, no mention of what environmental hazards meant. No note about what students did when it was shut down. Just a few vague words that could cover anything from mold to chemical problems, and a clear sense that I was not going to get anything more. Drainage issues, environmental hazards, a whole apartment complex that's been erased from maps. And that's the official explanation. If the story ended there, it would still be strange. But I couldn't let it go. Because the more I looked, the more the physical reality didn't match the way the university talked about it. Here's how to find the place, because I think people should know it's real. Start near Business Hall, the building that sits farthest out on that side of campus. Walk past it, away from the center of everything, away from the student traffic, until you pass the last normal parking lot in that direction. It's an odd lot because it's still open and maintained. Cars are parked there, the pavement isn't broken, the lines are still painted. But there's almost no foot traffic, like it's meant for people who don't want to be noticed. Keep going. You'll reach train tracks. Cross them. Once you cross, there are no helpful signs, no campus lights, no clear walkway, no little maps on posts like some campuses have. Most students who wander that direction turn back because it feels like you've hit the edge of university property. It feels like you're not supposed to go further. If you ignore that feeling and keep walking, Triad is there. It's 3 connected apartment-style buildings set back like someone tried to tuck them away. They sit far from every other dorm, far from the normal student apartments, far from academic buildings. On a campus where almost everything is close together, the distance feels intentional. It takes real effort to get there, and the whole time you're walking, you keep expecting to find a fence or a sign telling you you're going the wrong way. The first time I found it, I just stood there, staring, not because it looked dramatic, but because it was so solid and normal looking, in the simplest way. It wasn't a crumbling ruin. It wasn't covered in graffiti. It was just there. A real place where real students must have lived, and yet it had been pushed out of the campus story like it never happened. After that, I asked more people. Not many at first. One person here, one person there. And this is where things stopped feeling like a simple case of an old building being taken out of service. What follows is what I've been told. I can't verify most of it. Some parts come from multiple people and line up in disturbing ways. Other parts may be exaggerated, or shaped by fear, or changed over time the way campus stories always are. I'm sharing it because I've heard consistent details from people who don't know each other, and because the university's behavior around the building makes the rumors harder to dismiss. According to several people, Triad used to house students like any other apartment complex. The timeline is fuzzy. Different people place it in different years. I've heard early 2010s. I've heard closer to 2017. But the pattern of the story stays the same. At some point, assignments quietly stopped. Students were no longer placed there. There was no announcement. Triad simply disappeared from the housing portal, and new students stopped hearing about it. Then, according to the rumors, it didn't stay empty. The next part is the one people seem most nervous to talk about, even more than the idea of deaths or hauntings. The word that comes up again and again is isolation. The claim is that the university, or someone connected to the university, started using Triad to hold students who had been flagged for certain issues. People describe it as mental health crises, behavioral problems, incidents, things that never get explained clearly. Not punishment exactly, not officially, more like containment. A student would be removed from their dorm or apartment and taken to Triad. They'd be kept there for a minimum period that multiple people independently described as 2 weeks. They couldn't just leave. They couldn't reach family in a normal way. And the family would get some kind of form letter that used soft, carefully chosen language, something like voluntary wellness support, without stating where their child actually was. I want to be very clear. I have not met anyone who admits they were held there. I haven't seen one of these letters. I can't prove it. But I've now heard that same 2-week detail from 3 different people in separate conversations, months apart. They didn't know each other. They used almost the same phrasing, like they were repeating something that had been told to them in the same way. If it was just one person, I could write it off as a dramatic rumor. When it becomes 3 people telling you the same specific thing, it starts to feel less like a story and more like a leak. The darkest part of the rumor is tied to 2020. When COVID hit, the university emptied out fast. The campus went quiet in a way none of us had ever seen before. Some people went home, some got stuck, some stayed because they had nowhere else. That year felt like a break in reality, like the normal rules didn't apply. That's when people say something happened at Triad. The details change, depending on who is talking. Some say a resident who had been kept there much longer than 2 weeks finally broke under the isolation. Some say the person became violent. Some say 2 other students, usually described as a young man and a young woman, didn't make it out. The implication is that they were killed by the resident who snapped. I'm not going to include names. First, because I don't know if any of it is true. Second, because if it is true, those people deserve more than being turned into a detail in an internet post. And third, because even repeating names feels like the kind of thing that would make the wrong person pay attention. After that, the story goes, Triad was fully shut down. Staff were removed. Whatever program was operating there ended, and any records that directly connected students to Triad were handled quietly, the way institutions handle things when they want them to vanish. When you ask for the official explanation, you get something different, depending on who you ask and how hard you push. Flooding, mold, COVID delays, plans for demolition that keep being postponed, environmental hazards, infrastructure concerns. They rotate through excuses like they have a list of answers, meant to satisfy someone who isn't going to dig deeper. And here's the problem with that. Flooding and mold are not reasons to erase a building from every map. They're not reasons for housing staff to act like they've never heard of a place that was once part of campus housing. They're not reasons for an RA to go quiet when you say the name out loud. Buildings have mold all the time. Old dorms get shut down all the time. Universities don't usually treat them like state secrets. At some point, I realized I was doing all this research from a distance, and that I'd been standing in front of Triad during the day but hadn't actually faced what it felt like when campus was asleep. Part of me wanted to prove to myself that it was just a building, that the fear around it was exaggerated, that people were letting silence turn into a monster. So I went out there at night once. I'm not doing it again. It wasn't scary in a fun way. It wasn't the kind of horror you can laugh about later. It was just wrong. The kind of wrong that sinks into your stomach without giving you a clear reason. When you leave the main campus at night, you still hear life behind you. Distant laughter, a car door closing, someone's music leaking out of a dorm window, the soft hum of a place that's still awake. But when I crossed those tracks, it felt like the sound dropped away, like someone turned down the volume on the world. There were no voices out there, no casual noise, no lights in the distance except what came from behind me. The dark wasn't dramatic, it was just heavy. And the path to Triad, if you can call it that, felt like walking into a section of campus that had been cut loose. Up close, the buildings didn't look like student apartments in the way the others do. Something about the shape, the plain white exterior, the way the windows sat, gave it a cold, institutional feel. Not a cozy, student housing vibe, more like the kind of place built for observation and control. And the distance from everything else made it feel hidden on purpose, like the university wanted it far enough away that nobody would casually wander by and ask questions. I stood there for a while, maybe 10 minutes, staring at the windows. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I kept telling myself it was abandoned. The university said it wasn't being used. The maps didn't list it. It should have been nothing. Then, a light turned on. It was on the 3rd floor. It wasn't a warm lamp or a normal overhead light. It was a dim, sickly fluorescent yellow, and it flickered the way old lights do, like it was struggling to stay alive. The glow filled a small section of a window, and in that glow, I saw a silhouette. Someone was standing right up against the glass, motionless. Their face looked pressed close to the pane, like they were trying to see out, like the window was the only thin barrier between them and the rest of the world. They weren't moving the way a normal person moves when they're casually looking outside. They were just fixed there, watching the parking lot behind me, watching me. I remember thinking, for a split second, that it didn't look like a ghost. It looked like a person who had forgotten how to be a person, like something had happened to them in a place where time doesn't work normally, like they were checking if the outside world was still real. I moved without thinking. One step back, the figure vanished instantly, and at the exact same moment, the light snapped off. No slow fade, no click, just darkness, as if the room had never been lit at all. My body went cold. I turned, ready to run, and almost tripped. On the other side of the road, half hidden in the dark, there was something that looked like a small memorial. A cross, flowers, bits of glass that caught what little light there was, a name I couldn't read clearly in the moment, and small objects placed like offerings, trinkets, maybe notes, the kind of things people leave when they want to prove someone mattered. I jumped and spun back toward the building. Another light was on now, not where the first one had been. Different floor, different side. Same sick yellow color, the same uneven flicker. That was the moment my curiosity broke. Whatever I was looking at, I didn't want to understand it up close. I ran. I didn't wait to see if a third light came on. I didn't wait to see if the silhouette returned. I just ran back the way I came, back across the tracks, back toward the part of campus that pretends this place isn't there. After that night, I started paying attention to what other students said, and I stopped leading conversations with my own story. I'd mention Triad gently, then stay quiet and see what people offered on their own. That's when I learned that the lights weren't just my experience. I've now spoken to 5 students, different years, different social groups, no connection to each other, who all mention the same basic thing. Lights in Triad's windows. Not every night, not on a schedule anyone can predict, but lights turning on upstairs, usually late, usually past midnight, sometimes moving from one part of the building to another, as if someone is walking through runes. A couple of them also mentioned shadows, not clear faces, not a full person you could describe, just shapes behind glass, the sense of movement where there shouldn't be any. When I ask what they think it means, most of them shut down. They shrug, force a laugh, change the subject. The mood shift is always the same. People don't like holding that thought in their head for too long. As far as I can tell, the university's official position is still the same. Triad is decommissioned and awaiting next steps, which could mean renovation. It could mean demolition. It could mean legal problems. It could mean nothing at all. It's a phrase that sounds like action while promising nothing. But if the rumors are even close to true, if Triad was used for isolation or containment, if something happened there in 2020 and it was handled quietly, then next steps might mean something else. It might mean that whatever Triad was, it wasn't simply abandoned like an old dorm with bad plumbing. And the most unsettling idea, the one I try not to sit with for too long, is that it might not be finished. Because if it was truly dead, truly empty, truly waiting for demolition, why do the lights turn on? Why does nobody investigate them? Why is there an operational parking lot nearby that seems maintained for no obvious reason? Why does the silence around the building feel less like forgetfulness and more like discipline? There are people who say you can still feel what happened there, not in a movie way, not like transparent ghosts floating down hallways, more like Certain places hold on to things. Like violence, fear and isolation soak into the walls the same way water does. Like a building can remember, even when the people who caused the damage are gone. Some people talk about Triad as if it's still full, in a way, even if no one is supposed to be living there. Like the weight of the place never lifted after 2020, like something stayed behind. And then there are the lights, always the lights. They come on sometimes when the rest of campus is asleep. Not bright, not welcoming. That same dull fluorescent glow, like an old office or a hospital corridor. A kind of light that makes everything look sick. A kind of light that suggests someone is awake inside. Nobody explains it. Nobody posts about it openly. Nobody from the university ever addresses it. And the campus, as a whole, seems to hope students never walk past Business Hall and keep going, never cross the tracks, never follow that empty stretch where there are no signs to guide you. I don't know what really happened at Triad. I don't know what's still happening out there, if anything. I don't even know how much of the story I've been told is truth, and how much is fear filling in gaps left by silence. What I do know is this. The building exists. It has been erased from maps like someone took time and care to remove it. People who should be able to answer simple questions suddenly act like they can't. Students who have never met each other describe the same strange details. And at night, sometimes, the windows light up. I don't think I'm going to dig any deeper. I don't think I want to. But I think you should know it's there. Story 3. I've never been good at making friends, and there's a reason for that. I never stay anywhere long enough for it to matter. I'm in foster care. I've been moved so many times that I stopped counting for a while. But Cleveland is my 5th placement, and I can already tell it won't be my last. Every house is the same in the way that matters. New rules, new faces, new expectations, and the same polite look adults get when they're trying to decide if you're worth the trouble. Most of the time I'm not kicked out over one big thing. It's smaller than that. A couple of arguments, a complaint from a neighbor, a foster parent who realizes they don't like being responsible for someone who doesn't belong to them. Little things stack up until someone makes a call, and then you're packing your life into a trash bag again. So I learned not to attach. I learned to be quiet. I learned to watch people more than I talk to them. If you don't give anyone a reason to remember you, you don't give them a reason to miss you either. Mark and Linda are different, at least on the surface. It's just the two of them, in a modest house, in a decent part of the city. Mark runs a small construction crew, mostly renovations and repairs, so he's gone before I'm even fully awake and gets home late with dust still on his boots. Linda works part-time at a clinic nearby. She's the one who checks on me, who asks if I'm eating enough, if school is okay, if I need anything. It's not warm in a movie kind of way, but it's steady, like she's trying to do the job right. They never had kids of their own, and I can feel that in the way they treat me, like they're careful with me, like they've read enough to know what they're supposed to say, but they don't always know how to make it sound natural. Even so, they're not cruel. They don't drink. They don't scream. They don't bring strangers home at night. In my world, that already puts them above a lot of people. It's the first time I've had a room to myself. A real room, with a door that locks and walls that are actually mine. I keep it clean. I keep my stuff organized. I don't ask for much. I don't give them problems to solve. I don't remember how I entered the foster system. That's something people always want a story for. But I don't have one. I have blanks. I have paperwork. I have adults' guesses. One of the first families I stayed with liked telling people I'd been left on the steps of a church. They'd say it casually, like it was funny, like it made me some kind of stray animal. I never knew if it was true or just a cruel thing they'd invented because it got a reaction out of other adults. It didn't get much of a reaction out of me. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I didn't stay with them long after that. I'm 16 now, turning 17 later this year. I go to Lakeview High. I got dropped into 11th grade about 4 months ago, right in the middle of the school year, which means everyone already had their routines and friend groups and inside jokes. When you show up late, you're not really a person at first. You're just the new kid who will probably disappear again soon. The school itself wasn't hard to understand, but it was exhausting. The constant moving from room to room. Different teachers with different rules. Different faces looking at you like you're a question they don't care enough to ask out loud. For the first couple of weeks, I kept checking my schedule like I was afraid the paper would change on me. Eventually, it became routine. Once something becomes routine, you can survive it. I kept to myself at first, because that's what I always do. It's easier. When you don't make friends, you can't lose them. The name on my file is Hazel. I'm a guy, so that always lands the same way. First day in any class, the teacher reads attendance, sees Hazel, expects a girl, and then hears my voice answer. There's always a pause, always that quick look up to confirm I'm not joking, then a few giggles, sometimes a comment, sometimes someone repeats it under their breath, like it's entertainment. I was told one of my earliest foster families picked the name. They thought it would be funny. When I was younger, it used to get under my skin. I'd correct people. I'd snap back. I'd make it clear I didn't like it. None of it helped. It only made it more interesting. People feed on reactions. So now, I don't react. I just let them do their little laugh and move on. Most people get bored quickly when you don't give them anything to work with. For a while it stayed like that. School, home, silence. I went through the day like a ghost. Then something shifted, and it wasn't dramatic. It was small, almost accidental. One day before gym class started, I was in the gym shooting hoops on my own. I liked the sound of the ball and the echo in that huge room. I liked how basketball made sense. It was simple. You either make the shot or you don't. There's no pretending. A couple of guys noticed. One of them asked if I wanted to play. I didn't, not really. But I said yes, because saying no would have turned it into a whole thing. We played a short game, and I was good enough that they didn't treat me like a joke. After that, it kept happening. If a team was short, someone would call me over. If someone didn't understand an assignment, they'd ask me instead of waiting for the teacher. At lunch, someone would wave me over to sit with them instead of watching me eat alone. None of it was planned, but it built up like that's how normal life works. One small opening, then another. Before I realized it, I wasn't alone all the time anymore. Derek was the first friend I made. He was the basketball captain, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and the room would adjust around him. He noticed I could play, and he respected that. He didn't do the fake nice thing. He just treated me like I belonged on the court. That meant more than I expected. He was smart, too. Since I'd transferred in late, I was behind in a couple of classes, and he helped me catch up without making it feel like charity. He lived a few houses away from Mark and Linda. He was an only child, so it was easy for us to start hanging out. Easy enough that I almost trusted it. We started walking to school together most days. We talked about teachers, homework, stupid stuff we saw online. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all, and the quiet didn't feel uncomfortable. That was new for me, being quiet with someone without feeling like I was failing at being human. One morning on the walk to school, Derek mentioned his birthday was coming up in a couple of weeks. He sounded excited, like it actually meant something. Like it was guaranteed there would be people around him, celebrating. I didn't say much back, but it made me think about my own birthday. I don't really know when mine is. My file says July, but I've always assumed that was someone filling in a blank with whatever seemed reasonable. I've never had a reason to question it. No one ever planned anything for it, so it didn't matter. A date on paper doesn't mean much if no one treats it like it's real. That afternoon, walking home, we passed a building on a corner that hadn't been opened before. There was a big new sign bright enough to catch your eyes from down the block. North Star Family Pizza. Through the windows we could see arcade machines, colored lights, and a small stage area in the back. There were large mascot figures up there, big cartoon characters with fixed smiles. A banner stretched across the window said something about a grand opening in 3 weeks. Fun for the whole family. The kind of place that pretends everything is safe and clean and happy. I stopped and stared longer than I meant to. Derek asked what was up. I told him, honestly, that I'd never really done that kind of thing. Birthday parties, big groups, going somewhere loud and bright with friends like it was normal. Before Cleveland, I didn't even have friends. I didn't know what it felt like to be included without it being temporary. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't ask questions that would make it awkward. He just nodded and patted my shoulder, like he heard me, like it mattered, and then we kept walking. A couple days later, Derek showed up in the morning with an excited look that didn't match the gray sky. He told me his dad had some connection to the people running the pizza place, something through work. Derek's dad was a realtor, well known, always networking. Derek said his dad could get us in before it opened to the public. It would be a small group of classmates, kind of a test night, and they'd do Derek's birthday there. The way he said it made it sound like it was already set, like it was meant to happen. And that's how it ended up. 10 of us from school meeting to celebrate Derek's birthday at a brand new pizza place that technically wasn't open yet. Everyone got there on their own that evening. Derek and I walked together because we lived close. When we arrived, some of the others were already outside. Lena and Nina showed up on bikes, laughing like they owned the sidewalk. They'd been best friends since 5th grade, always together, always talking like no one else existed. Chloe came alone, quiet but friendly. Marcus and Soren arrived at the same time as us, both of them looking around like they were judging the place. Ben was waiting by the door, hands in his hoodie pockets. Jacqueline stood near the window, peering inside like she couldn't wait. Kyle came last, out of breath, saying he'd lost track of time. That was everyone. 10. From the outside, the place looked ready. Clean windows, bright sign. Lights on inside, the grand opening banner still up, now claiming it was only a week away. The whole thing looked like a fresh start, like money and effort had been poured into it. Inside, though, it didn't feel right. The lighting was lower than it should have been, like someone had dimmed it and forgotten. Decorations were up, but they didn't match each other, like different ideas mixed without a plan. The carpet looked new but wasn't laid properly everywhere. If you stepped near the edges, you could feel ridges under your shoes, uneven spots that made you adjust your stride. Soren muttered that the place needed more work before opening. Arcade machines lined one side of the room, a mix of older cabinets and newer ones, all turned on. The noise was steady, beeps, music loops, electronic sounds stacking on top of each other like a constant hum. At the far end, near the stage, 3 mascot figures stood in bright colors with frozen smiles. There were only 3 workers there, 1 behind the counter, 1 near the machines. One who kept going in and out from the back, bringing food in batches. They handed out tokens. They brought pizzas, fries, soda. They spoke politely, but something about them felt off, like they were doing an impression of employees instead of actually being people. Still, the night started normally enough. Everyone spread out. A few went straight to the arcade. Someone tried the claw machine and immediately got mad at it. Derek and I took turns at the basketball machine, feeding in tokens, aiming, laughing when the ball bounced off wrong. Derek moved around like a host, checking that no one was left standing alone. Kyle, as usual, was louder than the rest of us. He didn't stay still. At one point he wandered toward the stage and stopped in front of one of the mascots, the one leaning slightly to one side. He laughed and said it looked drunk. A couple others came over to see. Kyle pushed it lightly. It barely moved. He shrugged, like it wasn't interesting, and said he was going to check something. Then he walked off toward the hallway near the bathrooms. A while later, Jacqueline asked where Kyle had gone. The worker near the counter said, casually, that Kyle's parents had called about an emergency and he had to leave in a hurry. The worker claimed Kyle asked him to tell us he'd explain later. Derek said he'd seen Kyle on his phone earlier. That made the story sound believable enough. We joked about what kind of emergency it could be, then moved on. Derek asked the worker, once or twice, if Kyle had called back or sent a message, but the worker just shook his head. Kyle was gone, and no one had actually watched him leave. I didn't think about that detail until later, when it mattered. I stayed near the machines with Derek, and Marcus joined us. We played a couple games, talked a little. Time slid forward in that way it does when there's noise and lights, and you're trying, for once, to feel normal. Then I heard Lena on the other side of the room, her voice sharp with frustration. She was talking to Jacqueline and saying she and Nina had argued. She said Nina had gotten up, claimed she was going to the bathroom, and hadn't come back. Jacqueline tried to calm her down, saying Nina probably just needed a minute. Lena wasn't having it. She looked embarrassed and angry and worried all at once, and then she marched toward the hallway to go find her. At first, none of us made a big deal out of it. People go to the bathroom, friends argue. It happens. But Derek leaned closer to me and said, quietly, that he'd never seen Lena and Nina fight before. They'd been attached at the hip forever. For Derek to point it out meant it wasn't normal. A little later, Soren said he was hungry, and Derek glanced toward the back and frowned. The worker who'd been bringing food hadn't come out in a while. The music was still playing, but it sounded lower, like it was tired. Marcus looked around and asked where the other workers were. The one behind the counter and the one near the arcade machines. None of us had seen them for a while. Jacqueline walked up to the front door and tried the handle. It didn't budge. She tried again, then yanked her hand back quickly. "It's hot," she said. Ben stepped up like he didn't believe her and grabbed the handle. He pulled back instantly, swearing under his breath. From where I stood, I could see the metal wasn't just warm. It had a faint red glow, like it had been heating up for a long time. For a second, no one moved. We all stared at the door, then at each other. I asked where Lena and Nina were. No one answered. I asked again if anyone had seen them come back from the hallway. No one had. The room changed in that moment. The arcade sounds kept going like nothing had happened, but it didn't feel playful anymore. It felt like the machines were laughing at us, repeating the same tunes while something else started to press in around us. Derek swallowed hard and said we needed to check the place. Lena and Nina had to be somewhere, and the workers had to be somewhere too. He suggested we split up so we could cover more ground and call out if we found anything. We shouldn't have listened to him, but we did, because Derek was the one who usually had answers, and because it was easier to follow a plan than to stand there and admit we were trapped. I went with Ben and Marcus. We headed toward the hallway by the bathrooms. I'd walked past it earlier. It had been a normal hallway. Now, as soon as we stepped into it, my stomach tightened. It wasn't right. It went on too long, stretching ahead in a way that didn't fit the size of the building. The air felt colder, and not in a nice way. More like the cold you feel when you open a freezer and it breathes on you. The ceiling seemed lower too, like it was pressing down as we walked. Marcus slowed and said he didn't remember it being this long. Ben joked weakly that maybe we were just lost, but his voice didn't sound like he believed his own joke. We kept going, because going back felt like admitting something was wrong, and I wasn't ready to say that out loud. Halfway down the hall, there was a door standing open. I stopped. "I don't remember that," I said. Ben stepped closer, peering in. "I'll check," he said, like he could prove it was nothing. The moment he stepped inside, the floor beneath him gave out. It happened so fast my brain didn't catch up at first. Ben turned toward us with his eyes wide, arms flailing, reaching for the doorframe like he could grab the air. He made a choking sound, half shout and half gasp, and then he dropped straight down like someone had removed the ground. The door slammed shut before we could even move. Marcus rushed forward and grabbed the handle. He yanked it, but it didn't move. He threw his shoulder into it. Once, twice. The door didn't even shake. I screamed Ben's name until my throat hurt, until my voice cracked, but nothing came back from the other side. Just silence. Marcus looked at me, and I knew what he was thinking. There was nothing we could do, not with a door that didn't open and a floor that swallowed people. So we turned back. Only the hallway didn't feel like it was letting us leave. The walk back seemed longer than it should have been, like the corridor stretched behind us the same way it stretched ahead, like the building was playing tricks with distance. When we finally stumbled back into the main room, Derek, Soren, Chloe, and Jacqueline were already there. They were standing close together, eyes fixed on us like they'd been waiting for bad news. "Ben's gone," Marcus said. The words sounded wrong in the air, too big and too unreal. We explained what happened, talking over each other, our voices too fast. Derek kept looking past us toward the hallway, like he expected Ben to walk out laughing, like this could still turn into a stupid prank. Soren cursed under his breath. Jacqueline started to cry, trying to hide it, but failing. Chloe's face went pale, her eyes wide like she was seeing something behind us. No one had an answer for any of it. Then Chloe screamed. It was sharp and sudden, and every nerve in my body snapped to attention. She pointed toward the stage, her hand shaking so hard it looked like it might break. One of them moved, she said. We all turned. The mascots were still there, bright colors and fixed smiles, standing where they'd been, but the way Chloe stared at them made my skin crawl. I saw it, she whispered, her voice shaking. It moved. Nobody laughed. Nobody told her she was imagining it. Something in all of us knew better than to argue. We backed away from the stage, putting more distance between us and those frozen faces, and ended up huddled closer together in the middle of the room. There were 6 of us now. Me, Derek, Soren, Marcus, Jacqueline, Chloe. Chloe kept glancing toward the stage like she couldn't stop herself. Derek told her to stay close, to keep her eyes on us, not on them. But she kept mouthing something under her breath, like counting. Derek asked what she was saying. She lifted a finger, pointing with a trembling hand. "Where is it?" she stammered. "Where is it?" We looked again, and that's when we saw what she meant. There were only 2 mascots on the stage now. A cold wave went through my chest. My head spun as my mind tried to explain it in a normal way. Maybe one had been moved by the workers. Maybe it had been taken to storage. Maybe... Then Chloe screamed again. But this scream wasn't pointing at the stage. It was right behind us. I turned, and it was there. The missing mascot stood directly behind Chloe, close enough that its shadow fell over her shoulders. It had the same painted smile, the same bright colors, the same cartoon face, but up close, that smile didn't feel friendly. It felt empty, wrong, like the expression had been made to hide something underneath. For a second, none of us moved. My body locked up the way it does in nightmares, like fear had hit a switch. Then the mascot bent forward, its arms wrapped around Chloe before any of us could react. Chloe screamed and fought, twisting, trying to break free, but it held her easily, like she weighed nothing. The floor beneath her opened up like a trap door. Chloe dropped with the mascot dragging her down. Her screams echoed as she fell, fading fast, as if she was being swallowed by depth. And then, just like that, the opening closed again, sealing smooth like it had never been there. The room went still. Derek took a step forward on pure instinct and then froze, his foot hovering mid-step, like he didn't know if the ground could be trusted anymore. His face looked split between wanting to save her and knowing he'd die if he tried. 5 of us left. Me, Derek, Soren, Marcus, Jacqueline. No one spoke. Jacqueline's crying turned into quiet shaking. Soren stared at the stage with his jaw clenched tight. Marcus kept shaking his head, whispering that it didn't make sense, like repeating it might force reality to behave. Marcus swallowed and asked the question none of us wanted to say out loud. Was that what happened to Kyle too? The worker claimed Kyle's parents called, but no one had seen Kyle leave. Kyle was the first one to go mess with the mascots. What about Nina and Lena? They never came back from the bathroom hallway. Ben disappeared through a door that shouldn't exist. Chloe was taken through the floor like the building was alive. No one answered Marcus, because the answer was sitting in the room with us. That was when I saw something behind Marcus, a ripple in the wall, like the surface of it was softening. The outline of a door formed slowly, as if drawn by an invisible hand. It wasn't there a second ago. Now it was solid, complete, with a frame that looked like it had always belonged. It opened. Inside was a small room cut into the wall, and standing in it was another mascot. I screamed for Marcus to turn around, but it was too late. The mascot reached out, grabbed Marcus, and yanked him backward with sudden force. Marcus shouted and clawed at the air. Derek lunged forward and caught Marcus's arm, his fingers locking hard around Marcus's wrist. For 1 second it looked like Derek could pull him free. Then Derek's grip slipped, like the mascot's strength was unnatural, like Derek's hands couldn't hold on no matter how hard he tried. "It's too strong," Derek said, but he didn't finish whatever he meant. His voice broke. Marcus was dragged into the wall room, eyes wide, locked on us with pure terror. The moment he crossed the threshold, the floor beneath him opened, and he dropped out of sight exactly like the others. The door slammed shut. And then it was gone, melting back into solid wall like it had never existed. We stood there frozen until Soren nudged me and pointed toward the stage. Only one mascot remained now, and there were 4 of us left. Me, Derek, Soren, Jacqueline. We moved toward the center of the room and stayed there close together, like being away from the walls and hallways could keep us safe. No one trusted the doors. No one trusted the floor. The arcade machines kept playing their looping sounds, bright and cheerful, filling the air like a lie. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time didn't work right in that room. Everything felt stretched. Derek kept scanning, eyes moving constantly. Soren stood stiff beside him, tense and quiet. Jacqueline hugged herself tight, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Then we heard a noise near the counter, and all of us jumped. A worker stood there, one of the 3 from earlier, wearing the same uniform, standing like nothing had happened. None of us saw him walk in. He was just there. He looked at us with a blank face, like he was reading lines. After a few seconds, he spoke in a flat voice. He said 1 more was needed. If we gave them 1 more, the rest of us could leave. Derek demanded to know what he meant. The worker repeated it, exactly the same. 1 more was needed, and the remaining 3 could go. Then he added something that made my skin go cold. Either we choose, or they choose for us. After that, the door would open and whoever was left would be allowed to leave. Soren stepped forward, angry and desperate, and said we should rush the worker, grab him, do something. But Derek held out an arm to stop him. Derek shook his head slightly, like he could feel the rules of this place even if he didn't understand them. "They're not human," Derek said quietly. Jacqueline made a sound like she was trying not to sob. I moved closer to Derek and spoke low, so Soren and Jacqueline wouldn't hear everything. I told him I didn't know what to do. I told him I was terrified. I told him I didn't want to die here in some building that wasn't even real. I told him something else too, something I hadn't said out loud before, that he was the first person who'd been decent to me, The first person who'd made me feel like I wasn't just passing through. Derek's eyes filled with tears. He looked at me like he wanted to say something comforting, but didn't have the words. Behind him, I saw movement. The remaining mascot had stepped down from the stage. It was moving toward us in a steady, smooth way that didn't look like walking. It almost looked like it was gliding, like its feet weren't touching the carpet properly. The fixed smile stayed on its face no matter what. Soren saw it too. He didn't speak. His face drained of color. Derek took a slow breath. He looked at Soren, then at Jacqueline, and then back at me. His voice was quiet but firm, like he'd made a decision he couldn't undo. "When the door opens," he said, "just go." Soren immediately shook his head, starting to argue, but Derek cut him off. "Just go," he repeated. Then Derek turned toward the worker and said, "We have made our decision." The worker nodded like he'd been waiting for that exact sentence. He lifted one hand and made a small gesture, almost casual. The front door clicked. It swung open. Cold night air rushed in like freedom, like reality trying to reclaim us. Jacqueline made a broken sound and grabbed Derek, hugging him hard. Soren did too, briefly, like he couldn't accept it but couldn't deny it either. Derek pulled away gently, pushing us toward the exit with shaking hands. We ran. None of us dared look back, because looking back would make it real in a way we weren't ready for. But in my mind, I could already picture it. Derek standing alone, the mascot closing in, the floor opening, the building taking what it wanted. We barely made it half a block when we heard something behind us, a deep, crackling roar. We turned. North Star Family Pizza was on fire. Flames licked through the windows and climbed fast, spreading like the building had been soaked in gasoline. The bright sign glowed above the fire like a joke. Heat rolled out into the street. The glass shattered with loud pops. We ran farther, coughing on smoke, our hearts punching against our ribs. Soren kept yelling questions. What was happening? What was that place? How could the door have been hot? How could the floor open like that? But none of us had answers. Then, the sirens started. Fire trucks arrived first, then police. People shouted at us to move back. Someone grabbed my shoulder and guided me away from the heat. Paramedics sat us on the curb and checked us over, shining lights in our eyes, asking if we were burned, if we hit our heads, if we could breathe. Police started questioning us almost immediately. How many were inside? How did the fire start? Who owned the place? What did we see? We told them what we could. We said our friends were still inside. We said it was Derek's birthday. We said people disappeared. It didn't sound real, even when it came out of our mouths. My foster parents showed up. Linda looked like she'd been crying already. Mark looked angry in a way that was more fear than rage. They wrapped a blanket around me even though I wasn't cold. Linda kept asking if I was hurt, if I could talk, if I needed to sit in the car. I answered like a normal kid would, because I'd practiced normal for a long time. When a police officer asked my name, I gave him the one on my file, Hazel. He wrote it down without thinking twice. For days, the story spread around school and around the neighborhood, but it changed every time someone repeated it. Some people said it was a freak accident. Some people said it was a gas leak. Some people said it was an electrical problem. Some people said the place had been sketchy from the start. The truth was, the place wasn't properly registered. It had been bought through a shell company, a name that didn't connect to anything real. No one could find a clear owner. The worker descriptions didn't match anyone local. Security cameras, if there had been any, didn't turn up anything useful. Investigators walked through the burned remains and found nothing that explained trapdoors that opened and closed, walls that formed doors, metal handles that glowed red without a heat source. They didn't understand what they were dealing with. A few days later, I walked home from school alone. Derek was gone. Marcus, Chloe, Ben, Kyle, Nina, Lena, gone. Jacqueline and Soren were out, but they didn't talk to me much. Maybe because it hurt. Maybe because they didn't trust anyone who had been there and lived. Survivors make people nervous. I passed the ruins of North Star Family Pizza. The building was mostly a black shell now, taped off, surrounded by warning signs. The smell of smoke still clung to the air, sour and heavy. As I walked by, I heard someone call my name. Not Hazel. My real name, Azazel. I stopped. My whole body went still, and then I turned toward the sound. A figure stood near the taped-off ruins, hood up, face mostly hidden by shadow. He didn't move like a cop or a firefighter or anyone who belonged there. He stood like he was waiting for me, like this was an appointment. I walked toward him without thinking, like my feet already knew what to do. "Well done, Azazel," he said calmly, "on completing your 5th mission." My throat tightened, but I didn't act confused. There was no point. Confusion was for humans. "It's time to clean up here," he continued. "We'll be in touch for your next mission." That was all he said. No comfort, no praise beyond the words, no explanation, just confirmation. I turned and walked away, leaving him by the ruins like he was part of the smoke. My name is Azazel. Even if you don't recognize it at first, you feel it when you hear it. Some names carry a reaction in the body. This one does. I'm here in a human life right now, wearing a human face, living in a human house with foster parents who think I'm just another damaged kid the system dropped on their doorstep. I go to school. I play basketball. I sit in classrooms and walk hallways and answer to Hazel like it belongs to me. But I know where I come from, and I know who I serve. This life has one purpose: to wait until the missions come. Different cities, sometimes different states, sometimes different countries. The pattern always changes on the outside, but it ends the same way every time. I collect 7 souls. I deliver what I'm told to deliver. Then I move on. Cleveland was easy. Derek didn't come up with the idea of North Star Family Pizza. I put it there first, not as a building, not with bricks and permits and paperwork, but as a thought, a clean suggestion placed in the right mind at the right moment. The first time we stood outside that pizza place, I didn't have to do much. I didn't need to beg. I didn't need to argue. I only had to give a small push in the right direction, the kind that feels like your own idea when it appears in your head. By the next morning, Derek believed it was his plan. By the time he told the others, he believed it completely, like it had always been there, waiting for him. At the party, Kyle was first. A simple phone call with the right voice and the right urgency. A message that sounded like a parent. Fear is a leash on teenagers. Kyle stepped away from the group on his own, exactly the way I needed him to. No one watched him go. No one followed. People always assume someone else is paying attention. Nina and Lena came next. That part was simple too. At that age, friendships are intense and fragile. You can turn something small into a fight with almost no effort. A misunderstanding, a sharp sentence, a feeling of being disrespected. They were best friends for years, which made them easier, not harder. The closer people are, the more it hurts when you bend them against each other. Ben followed. After that, it was about positioning, about keeping people standing where they needed to stand, without them noticing they were being guided. People think control looks like force. Most of the time, it's just influence. Small adjustments, a step left, a pause, a distraction at the right moment. I kept Chloe and Marcus near the machines facing the stage. When they drifted, I steered them back with nothing more than timing and attention. Chloe saw the mascots move because I let her see it. The mind notices what it's allowed to notice. Marcus came after. Then, Derek. That part always ends the same way. When you give humans a choice, that isn't really a choice. They still cling to the idea of choosing. They want to believe they have control over how the story ends. Derek believed he was saving 3 people. In a way, he was. He did what a good friend would do. But the result was the same result I always deliver. 7 souls. I don't fail my missions. That's why they send me. Afterward, I stay for a while, long enough to make things settle the way they should. I stay with the foster family. I go to school. I walk through the funerals with the right expression on my face. I say the correct words when someone talks about tragedy. I keep my head down. I wait. When the next mission comes, I'll get moved again. Another city, another set of adults who think they're saving a kid, another school with teachers who pause at the name Hazel, another group of teenagers who don't realize how easy it is to lead them. And when it's time, I'll start again. I don't know where it will be yet, but I'm ready for it. Story 4. My eyesight is terrible. I know a lot of people say that like it's a joke, but I'm not exaggerating. My better eye is -11. My worse eye is -14. Past -10, it doesn't even feel like there's a difference anymore. The world turns into blocks of color and soft edges, and you learn to recognize people and objects by movement, voice, and instinct more than by sight. What makes it even more annoying is that it doesn't make sense in my family. Both my parents only need reading glasses, and even that started for them pretty late. My dad might not have even noticed if his job hadn't required eye tests. He's a sea captain, and for someone like that, they don't let you just guess what you're seeing. When I was little, I wanted to be like him more than anything. Not in the vague way kids say they want to be astronauts or superheroes. But seriously, I wanted the sea, the ship, the whole life. I imagined myself standing on a bridge, calling orders, reading the horizon, being the kind of person who didn't belong to land. I found out early that it wasn't going to happen. A kid with eyes like mine doesn't get to command anything that depends on vision. So I did what kids do when one dream is taken away. I twisted it into another. If I couldn't conquer the ocean, then I wanted it anyway. I wanted to be near it, inside it, swallowed by it. That sounds dramatic, but even as a child, it felt natural. We're born wet. We spend our first months floating and feeding, and then we get dropped into dry air and told to accept it. Most people settle for warm baths and swimming pools. like they're enough. For me, they never were. We lived by the sea, which meant the ocean was always there, always calling. It gave me plenty of chances to test how far I could go. My parents hated that part, not because they didn't worry about me. They did, but because I was a strong swimmer, and that made me reckless. The real problem was money. When I swam in the ocean, I lost my glasses. Constantly. Salt water and waves and sand don't care about expensive lenses. Sometimes they slipped off when I dove. Sometimes I'd take them off because I didn't want them to get wet, and then I'd forget where I'd put them. Sometimes a wave would hit me at the wrong angle, and they'd be gone before I even realized it. I lost them so often that my apologies all blend together in my memory. So does the fuzzy, disappointed shape of my mother's face when she realized she'd have to buy another pair. Without glasses, I couldn't see her expression, but I could still feel it. That heavy silence, the tired way she'd say my name, the way she'd pinch the bridge of her nose like she was trying to stop a headache. But there was one time I remember clearly. That time, I didn't just lose my glasses. I almost died. I was 7. I was in the water doing what I always did, pushing my luck, letting the waves pull me farther, pretending I was fearless. I remember thinking of the sea like it had hands, big greedy hands, patient hands, like it was a creature that waited for you to get comfortable before it reached out. I was teasing it, in my own childish way, swimming out, letting myself get pulled, then swimming back like I'd won. I remember turning my head toward the shore one last time and seeing my mom lying on a towel, sunbathing. From that distance, without glasses, she wasn't a person so much as a shape in bright light. But I could tell it was her by the way she didn't move much, the way she was positioned like she was trying to enjoy one peaceful moment. Then the ocean grabbed me. It didn't feel like a single wave. It felt like the water changed its mind about me, like it stopped being a place I played and became something that wanted me. The current pulled hard, suddenly, and the next thing I knew, my feet weren't finding the bottom. I kicked and reached, but the water kept shifting under me, pushing me down and sideways at the same time. Before I even understood what was happening, a wave crashed over my face and ripped my mouth open. Water stormed in. I swallowed it by accident and then choked, and when I tried to breathe, I pulled more of it in. Everything became panic and salt and noise. I was trapped. I could see light somewhere above me, brighter than everything else, but it felt impossibly far. Every time I kicked toward it, another surge pushed me down again. The surface kept disappearing behind moving darkness. I tried to scream, but all that did was waste air I didn't have. If I had been able to think clearly, I would have prayed. That's what adults always say, right? That in the moment you're about to die, you call out to God. But at 7 years old, there wasn't space for prayer. There was only the urgent animal part of me that wanted air. I remember the light dimming. At first I thought it was because I was sinking. Then it felt like something passed between me and the sun, blocking it. For a second I saw what looked like an eclipse, light swallowed by shadow. The shadow moved closer, and then the shadow grabbed me. Something wrapped around me and pulled me upward with one strong motion. My body broke through the surface, and I coughed and gagged, water spilling out of me like I was a broken container. I was yanked into the air and pressed against something solid. Arms, real arms, locked around me so tightly it hurt, like the person holding me was afraid to loosen their grip, even for a second. I heard my mom's voice right next to my ear, loud and shaking. "Oh my God," she kept saying. "Oh my God. You're safe. You're safe." Her voice was so frantic that it didn't sound like her. I wrapped my arms around her neck and held on. That was the moment it hit me, the truth of what had been happening. I'd been terrified, not just startled or uncomfortable, but truly terrified. It was like my body had known before my mind did. She carried me to the shore. I let her. Normally, I would have fought to walk on my own, because being carried felt like being a baby. But I couldn't stop shaking, and I couldn't stop coughing, and the sand under my feet didn't feel real. I didn't cry. The sea had already cried for me. That's how it felt, like the ocean had poured itself through me, left me soaked in its tears. My mother wrapped me in a towel that was rough with sand stuck in it. She rubbed my hair and shoulders hard, trying to dry me, trying to warm me, trying to convince herself I wasn't slipping away again. Even though I couldn't see her face clearly, I still remember the fear in her. I could hear it in every breath she took. I could feel it in the way her hands wouldn't stop touching me, checking me, like she needed proof I was solid. And that fear changed everything between us for a moment. That was the only time she didn't scold me for losing my glasses in the sea. Usually, losing them meant a lecture. It meant frustration and silence, and my dad eventually stepping in to calm things down. But that day, none of that mattered. Her voice was full of pure worry. She kept telling me she thought she'd lost me. She kept telling me she loved me. It made me feel two things at once. I felt scared because I had almost died, and I felt embarrassed because I had made her feel that kind of fear. But underneath both of those was something else, something I still don't know what to do with when I remember it. I felt loved in a way I haven't felt before or since. There was something raw and honest in her panic. Like for once, there was no distance between what she felt and what she showed. On the walk home, I kept stumbling. Without my glasses, the world was a soft blur. The sidewalk edges didn't exist. Curbs jumped at me. I misjudged distances and bumped into things. My mother held my hand tight and guided me, still talking like she needed to keep me anchored with her voice. I remember thinking about my dad. I missed him. He was often gone, out somewhere on the ocean, doing the job that had made the sea feel like part of our family. When he was away, the house felt different, quieter, like it was waiting. That night, I couldn't do much. Without glasses, I couldn't read, couldn't draw properly, couldn't see the TV clearly. My mother made dinner, and after we ate, she sat with me and read me a book. I wish I remembered what book it was. I don't. I only remember the sound of her voice, steady now, softer, like she was trying to erase the day. The words blurred into comfort. I felt my body finally start to relax, the fear draining out slowly like water from a bathtub. I've struggled with insomnia for most of my life. Even now, I can lie in bed for hours with my mind wide awake, listening to every small sound, feeling like sleep is something I'm locked out of. That night, though, I fell asleep easily. Her reading did something to me. It calmed me down fast, like it was a spell. Within minutes, my eyes were heavy. The last thing I remember from that evening is her leaning down and kissing my forehead good night. Then darkness came over me. Steady, secure darkness, wrapping around my eyesight and my dreams at the same time. The next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of the front door unlocking. It was deep night, the kind of night where the house seems too quiet, where you can hear the building settling, where every sound feels bigger than it should. I was still half asleep, disoriented, but I knew that sound. Key and lock, door opening, someone coming in. I was a little afraid of the dark back then. Not the normal childhood fear of monsters exactly, but the fear that something could be in the room and I wouldn't know until it was close. When you can't see well, darkness isn't just darkness. It's like being blind inside your own home. Still, I got out of bed. I walked into the hallway, rubbing my eyes, trying to focus on the shape at the front door. Without glasses, the figure was just a tall blur against a darker blur, but I could tell someone was there by the way the shape blocked the little bit of outside light. The person turned, and when she saw me, she screamed. It wasn't a small yelp. It was a full scream, sharp and terrified. The kind that would normally send a kid diving back into bed and hiding under blankets. But it didn't scare me the way it should have. It mostly confused me. Because it was my mother's scream, I would recognize her voice anywhere. Even without sight, even half asleep, I knew it was her. She was shaking so badly that her words tripped over each other. "How did you get home?" she kept asking. "How did you get home?" Over and over, like she couldn't accept what she was seeing, like my presence in the hallway broke the rules of reality. I stared at her, still confused, and asked what she meant. I told her I was home. I'd been home. I'd gone to bed. I didn't understand why she was acting like I'd appeared out of nowhere. She didn't answer at first. She just kept staring at me, one hand on the doorframe, like she needed support. Then she rushed toward me and grabbed me, pulling me into a tight hug that hurt. She was breathing hard. I could feel her heart pounding through her chest. Between breaths, she started talking, fast and broken. She told me she'd been at the beach all day. She told me I had gone into the water, and then I was gone. She said she searched and screamed and ran up and down the shore. She said people helped her look. She said she called for me until her throat gave out. She said the police came. She gave a statement. She said they told her that sometimes the sea takes children and doesn't give them back. And the whole time she was saying it, she sounded like she was right back there again, standing on the shore watching the water. I didn't understand how both things could be true. I didn't understand how she could have spent a whole day believing I was dead, while I had memories of her pulling me from the water, drying me off, walking me home, reading me a book, and kissing me goodnight. It didn't fit together, not even in a child's mind. That moment became a story in our family, the kind of story people bring out at parties or when they want to entertain someone. Over the years, it got told and retold so many times that some details became polished, like a joke people repeat until it has a rhythm. Most people didn't really believe it. They laughed in the right places. They made comments about stress, about mistaken timelines, about how fear can confuse your memory. They treated it like an odd little mystery, with no sharp edges. But my parents didn't treat it like that. My mom never laughed when she told it. Not really. She could smile, but her eyes always went somewhere else, like she was looking at the water again. For that entire day, she had been convinced I'd drowned or got kidnapped. That kind of belief doesn't leave you clean. It stays in you. As for me, I grew up with the question sitting in the back of my mind like a stone. If my mom didn't pull me from the water, then who did? Someone did. I know that as surely as I know my own name, I can still feel the moment I was lifted out, pressed against a chest, held in a grip that was too tight to be gentle, but too careful to be cruel. I remember being carried. I remember the towel. I remember the book. But when I try to picture the person who rescued me, I can't. Without my glasses, every face was an oval with 3 dark holes, 2 eyes, and a mouth. That's it. I didn't have the detail to build a real memory. It could have been anyone. A stranger, a neighbor, a tourist, someone passing by. Or something else. That's the part I don't say out loud, because it makes people's expressions change. They start trying to diagnose you with their eyes. They start looking for the line between imagination and delusion. But I still wonder, because there's a gap in the story that no one can fill. A whole day where my mother thought I was gone, and yet I was here, asleep in my bed, safe enough to dream. I don't know who brought me home. Sometimes I tell myself it was a kind stranger. Sometimes I tell myself my mother's memory of the beach was wrong because trauma can do that, because the mind can stretch time and lose pieces. Sometimes I tell myself my memory of that evening is the part that's wrong, that maybe I dreamed it, that maybe I didn't really get rescued and carried home at all. But then I remember her scream in the hallway when she came through the front door. That scream wasn't confusion. It was shock. It was the sound of someone seeing a dead child standing in their house. And when I remember that sound, I can't convince myself it was just a mistake. So I live with the only honest answer I have. I don't know who pulled me out of the sea that day. I only know that something did, and it brought me home, and I went to bed believing my mother loved me enough to save me, while my mother spent an entire day believing the ocean had taken me for good. Story 5. I started a new job recently, and my life has gotten a lot busier than I expected. I just graduated from college, and like most people in my situation, I took the first decent opportunity I could find, something that paid enough for me to finally move into my own place and start living like an adult. I didn't have much time to be picky. Rent is brutal, and I didn't want to end up back at home after graduation with no plan. The company that hired me owns a couple of apartments close to the office. Apparently, it's something they do for new hires who relocate or for people who work weird hours and need to be nearby. They offered to let me rent one of those apartments for a price so low, it didn't even feel real. The only catch was that I had to move far from home, far from my friends, and basically restart my life in a new city with a new routine. Still, it felt like the kind of deal you don't say no to. I signed the paperwork, packed everything I owned into my car, and drove out thinking I'd gotten lucky. For the first week, it honestly seemed like I had. Work was going well. My coworkers were friendly in that tired office way, where they don't overdo it, but they also don't make you feel like an outsider. My boss seemed competent, which is rare enough that I was genuinely relieved, and the job itself wasn't the nightmare I'd built up in my head. It was busy, sure, but I could understand it. I wasn't drowning. I felt like I was getting my footing. Then something small started happening. Something so small, at first, that I tried to explain it away. One of the downsides of this job is that we coordinate with people in different time zones all over the world. That means sometimes I have to be available at odd hours. Early mornings, late nights, hours that don't match a normal schedule. I've never been a heavy sleeper, so I figured it wouldn't be a big problem. I'm the kind of person who wakes up easily. I've always been like that, which is why it made no sense when my alarm stopped going off. The first time it happened, I woke up and immediately knew something was wrong. The light in the room looked different, too bright. My brain did that quick calculation where you try to remember what time it is before you check. Then I checked my phone and my stomach dropped. I was already late. I blamed myself. Maybe my phone died overnight. Maybe I forgot to set the alarm. Maybe I set it for PM instead of AM without noticing. It was my first week at a new job. I was stressed. I was adjusting. There were plenty of normal reasons for a stupid mistake. I charged my phone, double-checked everything, and went to bed telling myself it wouldn't happen again. It did. The second time I knew I had set the alarm, I remembered doing it. I even remember looking at the screen before I put the phone down, the way you do when you're trying to be responsible. Still, I woke up late, again. Now, I was embarrassed. Being the new person is already uncomfortable. Being the new person who can't show up on time is worse. My boss didn't yell at me, but I could tell it made an impression. It's hard to build trust when you're already starting with excuses. That night, I did everything I could think of. I set multiple alarms, different times, different tones, vibrate and sound. I left the phone plugged in. I even placed it on the nightstand instead of the bed, so it wouldn't get muffled. And still, I woke up late. By the end of that week, my "maybe I'm just adjusting" explanation was gone. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't me sleeping through it. Something was happening to the alarms themselves. I opened my alarm history and stared at it like it would confess something. The alarms were still set, but somehow they weren't making noise. Or maybe they were, and something was stopping them before they could reach the point where they'd wake me up. I started to feel paranoid, like I was missing something obvious. So I did what a slightly stressed, sleep-deprived person would do. I bought an old-fashioned alarm clock. I don't even know why I thought that would help. Maybe because it wasn't connected to anything. No software, no updates. No "do not disturb" setting I didn't understand. Just a simple clock that would scream at me when it was time to wake up. I bought it, brought it home, plugged it in, and set it up on the nightstand. I tested it in the afternoon by setting it for a minute from then, and it went off loud enough to make me jump. Perfect. Problem solved. That night, I went to sleep a little more confident. I woke up late again. This time, I grabbed the clock the second I woke up and stared at the display. The alarm was still set. Nothing looked wrong. I checked the outlet. It was still plugged in. I checked the time. The clock was keeping time correctly. The alarm should have gone off. It hadn't. At that point, I started asking myself questions that felt ridiculous even while I was thinking them. Was there a power issue at night? Was the outlet shutting off? Did the clock have some weird feature I didn't know about? Was I sleepwalking and turning it off without remembering? I didn't like any of those answers, but they were still normal answers. I kept trying to keep it in that normal category. At work, I tried to bring it up casually, not in a panicked way, Just as a weird problem, I asked one of my coworkers if they'd ever had trouble with alarms not going off, maybe in the company apartments. I expected them to laugh and say something about bad wiring or thin walls, or something harmless. They actually did laugh, but not the way I expected. "Haha," they said. "You sound a lot like Dave, the guy you replaced. He was a stickler for punctuality too, right up until the end." I felt my face tighten. Something about the way they said, "right up until the end," made my stomach go cold. It didn't sound like a joke. "What happened to him?" I asked. "Did he just move to another company?" My coworker's smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. "Oh," they said, and then they looked around the office like they suddenly remembered other people existed. They lowered their voice. "You didn't know. Dave didn't quit. He had a heart attack. Right there in that company apartment they gave you. Stress," they said. "They found him on a Tuesday morning, 3 hours after his shift was supposed to start. His alarm was still ringing when the landlord opened the door." For a second, I didn't know what to say. The conversation had gone from casual to horrible in less than a minute. I made some kind of awkward response, something like, "Wow, that's terrible." And then I walked away and tried to focus on work. I couldn't. The rest of the day, that sentence replayed in my head. His alarm was still ringing. The way my coworker said it made it sound like a detail they weren't supposed to repeat, but it had slipped out anyway. It didn't make sense alongside what was happening to me. If Dave's alarm was still ringing when someone found him, why were my alarms being silenced? Why did it feel like the one thing I needed to keep my job was being taken from me? When I got home, the apartment felt smaller than it had that morning. The air felt stale in a way I hadn't noticed before, like the place had been closed up for a long time. I stood at the door for a few seconds without moving, listening. There wasn't any sound besides the normal building noise, but I still felt like I was walking into someone else's space. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I couldn't stop thinking. This was Dave's bed. Dave had slept here. Dave had woken up here, stressed and exhausted, trying to make it to work on time, trying not to mess up, trying not to lose everything. And then he died here, alone. I stared at the digital clock on the nightstand. The red numbers looked harsh in the dim light, like they were the only thing in the room that had any energy. That night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I know how that sounds. It sounds like the kind of dramatic thing people say, and then they pass out anyway. But I meant it. I didn't want to wake up late again. I didn't want another conversation with my boss, where I had to explain something I couldn't explain. And more than that, I wanted to know what was happening. I needed to see it for myself, because the uncertainty was starting to feel worse than any possible answer. I set the alarm for 3 a.m. I picked that time because it was far enough into the night that I'd normally be asleep, and close enough that I could endure staying awake for it. I placed the clock on the floor next to the bed, where I could see the display, even if my eyes were barely open. Then I turned off the lights and lay down fully dressed, just in case I needed to move fast. I tried to keep my breathing calm. I stared at the faint red glow of the numbers and waited. The minutes dragged. Every tiny sound in the apartment felt loud. The building settling, pipes somewhere in the walls, a distant car passing. My eyes burned from trying not to blink too long. I kept checking the clock, watching the numbers change, forcing my mind to stay sharp. At 2:59 a.m., the room changed. It wasn't a sound, it wasn't a clear movement, it was like the air itself tightened. The temperature dropped in a way that didn't feel like a normal draft. My skin prickled, the back of my neck went cold, and then there was a smell. It was faint at first, like something old and sweet and wrong. The only way I can describe it is the smell of old people, like stale cologne, dusty fabric, and that heavy, sour note that clings to places where someone has been sick. It filled the room so quickly it felt impossible, like it hadn't drifted in from anywhere. It had just appeared. I kept my eyes mostly closed, because suddenly I didn't want to see. I don't know why. It was an instinct, like part of my brain was telling me that if I opened my eyes all the way, whatever was in the room would know I was looking at it. The red digits clicked over. 3 a.m. I braced for the alarm. It didn't beep. Instead, something moved in the darkness under the bed. A hand came out first, not a normal hand. It looked gray and half-transparent, like it wasn't fully in the room. It flickered in the moonlight that came through the blinds. The edges of it weren't steady. It looked like an old video with a bad signal, like it couldn't decide what shape it wanted to hold. It reached for the clock. For one stupid second, I thought it was going to gently press the snooze button, like some weird sleepwalking prank. Like I'd finally catch the cause, and it would be explainable. It didn't press anything gently. It slammed its palm down on the clock. Hard. It was a violent, flat smack, but the sound didn't match the movement. It was like the impact was swallowed before it could become noise. The clock didn't go flying, but it jolted slightly, and the display flickered. Then I heard it. A laugh. Not a normal laugh. Not even a clear voice. It filled the room in a way that didn't come from a specific corner. It was thin and cold, like someone laughing with no warmth in it, like it was meant to be heard as a message. My chest tightened so hard it hurt, and then the head appeared. Something leaned over the side of the mattress, slow and deliberate, like it had done it before. A face came into view, ghastly pale, with a bluish tint around the lips. The skin looked waxy, stretched too tight in places, and sunken in others. The eyes were open, but they didn't look alive. They looked fixed, like they were staring at a point just past me. It leaned close to my ear. The cold of it was immediate. Like opening a freezer and sticking your face inside, its breath hit my skin, and it smelled like rot, like damp earth, like something that had been sealed away and should have stayed sealed. When it spoke, the voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "My shift isn't over," it hissed, "and you're sleeping in my bed." That sentence did something to me. It wasn't just fear. It was the certainty behind it, like it wasn't trying to scare me for fun, like it believed what it was saying, like it had been stuck in a routine so long that death hadn't interrupted it. I screamed. I didn't try to be brave. I didn't try to reason with it. I didn't even know if I was really awake. I just reacted. I shot up, nearly tripping over the clock, and stumbled off the bed. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even find the light switch. I ran out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and down the hall without caring who heard me. I don't even remember locking the door. Now I'm sitting in my car, hands still trembling on the steering wheel, trying to convince myself this happened. Part of me wants to call someone, anyone. Another part of me is terrified that if I go back inside, even for a minute, I'll see that same flickering hand reaching out from under the bed like it's been waiting. I don't know what to do. Do I tell my coworkers what happened and risk sounding insane? Do I tell my boss and risk getting fired or labeled as unstable? Do I call the landlord and demand a different apartment, knowing they'll probably laugh? Or do I just take the most basic survival approach and leave, accept the financial hit, and never step foot in that place again? I keep thinking about Dave, about how they found him 3 hours after he was supposed to start, about his alarm still ringing, and about what that thing said in my ear, so close I felt its breath. My shift isn't over. I don't know if that apartment is cursed, or if something happened to Dave that nobody talks about, or if the company knows more than they're saying. I just know I'm sitting in my car at night, afraid to go back inside, and I can't shake the feeling that whatever is in there doesn't think I'm supposed to be there at all.